Outlook Business Investment Summit 2021 is brought to you by ICICIdirect.com. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Outlook Business Investment Summit 2021. The topic for this session is profiting from the startup surge. I have with me three very eminent speakers. Ninad Karpe, partner 100x VC, an early stage VC firm which aims to invest in 100 startups every year. Ninad was the MD and CEO of Aptech till 2016. He's amongst the most enterprising and affable people you can ever meet in business. And the best part I like about him is despite all his accomplishments, you will always find his feet firmly on the ground. And I have two lovely ladies, Nandini Mansinka. She is the co-promoter and CEO of Mumbai Angels, a platform for startups and early stage venture investments. She's been a serial entrepreneur and angel investor since 2010. Nandini is passionate about democratizing investments in early stage startups and making this asset class a part of every investor's portfolio. This panel is hopefully a small baby step in that direction. And then I have Neha Singh, the co-founder of Traxon, a data analytics firm. Let's call it the Bloomberg of startups. It's data, but sophisticated data on startups, and Traxon tracks more than 500,000 startups across 250 sectors globally. Welcome all three of you. Thank you so much for joining me on this discussion today. And Ninad, my first question is to you. We all agree that since the pandemic struck, the world has changed in some irreversible ways, especially because of the digital leap. And now this has meant both disruption and opportunity. Please tell us, how has the environment changed for early stage startups in terms of enthusiasm amongst people to take to entrepreneurship on one hand, and also to take to angel investing on the other?
Thanks, Maha. That's, I'll make it brief because you've asked me such a loaded question. Firstly, I hope all of you viewers are safe and well. So, Maha, what happened is when it first struck last March, I think all of us were a little bit of state of shock. I think there's a pause. Everyone pressed the pause button from say March to somewhere around July, August, September, that time frame. Startup founders also and even investors. But after that, it has come with vengeance now. From September onwards, it started picking up. And now we are seeing interest, which is far, far greater than earlier. What has changed? The startup founders have realized this is their opportunity. It's unfortunate what is happening for the health issues around the world, particularly India. But purely from a business perspective, digital is mainstream, work from home is mainstream, consumer behavior has changed, people are consuming things at home. I mean, I can go on and on. Such huge changes which are permanent shifts, which has now thrown huge opportunities for startups. These are not things which legacy companies can quickly adapt to. They take time, they move slowly. These guys move fast and they're sensing a lot of opportunities. Agri-tech, ed-tech, health tech, you name it, there are opportunities. So on the startup side, we are seeing far more pitch decks flowing to 100x than before. And these are people, fortunately, one of the trends we are seeing is even from tier 2, tier 3 towns, now we're seeing a lot. Earlier, we were always seeing from Bangalore, Delhi, Bombay, Pune, some of these places, tier 2, tier 3. So yes, on the startup side, we are seeing a lot more pitch decks coming up. On the investor side, what has happened probably is, people have got more investable surplus because they're at home and they're not kind of invested. All of them, big and small, are looking at an alternate asset class to invest. They all know about property. They all know about stock market, public markets, all that back and forth. It's already got a lot of, focus. They are saying part of their wealth, they should invest in alternate asset class. And believe me, there's no better alternate asset class than investing in startups. And what better place can do it than in India? So this whole concept of investing in alternate asset class has picked so much momentum that from angels to large family offices to VCs, we are seeing so much interest in startups. So they're realizing, probably asymmetric returns are to be made in startups. There's high risk, there's no doubt, but the asymmetric returns to be made and part of your wealth has to be put. So on that side also, the momentum is huge. So on both sides, actually, we are seeing just an amazing amalgam of factors, which is, I think it's a breakaway year. 2021. In the first 4 months, we have seen already 10 unicorns. So this 2021 will be a breakaway year.
Sure. Nandini, that's exactly, I saw you on your Twitter, I think a day or two ago, you put out this video saying 2021 is a pivotal year for angel investing in India. You also said innovation is currently being embraced at an exceptional rate across sectors and especially in those that are receiving positive tailwinds because of COVID-19. Yes. Absolutely true. Throw some light on, in terms of actual activity on the ground and your experience in the past 1 year, how this is getting manifested.
Yeah, so, like Ninad mentioned, the last year actually was a breakaway year for the entire ecosystem. And, I actually want to just throw some light on the term that we use as startup. So that actually starts giving you a very, I think, miscalculated nomenclature, which says startups are something very different from the other investing activity that you do. It's not. It's basically you're saying that the same company that's going to become, say, listed or become a unicorn over, say, a 3-4 years time, how early are you willing to get into it? So so like the place where, say, Ninad is, he's still even one step earlier than what we do at Mumbai Angels. But if you look at where we all operate, we are operating at what is called early stage venture investing. So you are asking somebody to say, listen, check into and say Uber or an Ola or a Flipkart, not when it becomes a Flipkart, but when it's a 2-member team looking for a 2 crore kind of a number. If you look at what happened with us, so when you said on the ground, I can talk to you about the exact data of what happened with us, right. So to give you a sense of what, and I think the same thing was replicated amongst all peers in this ecosystem. So when we started out, say in March, I was very worried. I thought that, now you're in a lockdown, everything is going to come down because you start hearing these bad news, etc. We were actually surprised that the next 3 months, so April, May, June, were the best ever months for us for Mumbai. Best ever. And when I say best ever, I'm talking both in terms of the investors who came on board. So more people started, reaching out to us, became more amenable to start looking at this as an investor asset class. So we added more members last year than we ever did. And on the opposite side, the number of deals that we started closing, the number of investments that we started closing, that also started shooting up. And this started shooting up both in terms of the number of investments and the amount that we were being able to invest. So just to give you a sense on that, on an average, we do an investment in a company anywhere between 50 lakhs to 2 crores. Last year was one of the only times that we actually managed to do a 1 million round within the network. We've never seen it, so that's not the thing. And in terms of the kind of companies you were doing everything, the entire universe. We did a defense tech, space tech, agri tech, and we don't just do tech. We also think that at the angel level, I think it is not just right to say you're going to unicorn hunt, because if you ask me, I think anybody who stands there and says, listen, I know which one is going to become a unicorn, I'm little skeptical, okay? I think it is about going and investing in interesting, promising startups and keep working with them, and you will find some of them will become unicorns. It's the opposite way that you do it. So we had a lot of consumer, a lot of non-tech, etc. companies that came up. Now what happened? So last year we did about 35 companies investment. Now there was this big challenge that we started facing by June or so, saying, we've done these investments, but what about the next level, the exits? Because for the investor, it's the full cycle. It's not just the investment. They need to see the exits and the next round happening. And we were worried, saying, is this going to happen? Or is the VC becoming a little worried? Because, you know this better than me because you're so much more in the market. Is that in the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of VCs started saying, listen, we are not going to invest outside. We are going to double down onto our own portfolio. You must have heard that over and over again. That also started easing out. And you started seeing a lot more investments. I think to just to give you a sense of our data, we invested in 35 company last years, and we saw 36 of our portfolio companies get exits or next round. So imagine the full circle is happening. And this year, we have again started with a bang. So I think there is this, like Ninad mentioned, this is the best time that founders can go out, look for money, because now there is this irreversible interest in investors, both at the retail end and the family office, to start saying, can I put up to 5% of my investable portfolio into this asset class?
Sure.
We are at the cusp of something huge, I would think.
Sure. Of course, it is, because overall investment in equity in India itself is such abysmal levels. And out of that, venture is like an even smaller part. So obviously, when the equity as a class grows, I'm sure more and more people will get educated and that will start have a trickle down effect on venture investing as well. So Neha, tell us the macro picture, because you track data not only in India but also globally, and how much enthusiasm is reflected in the data, and are there any insights in terms of where maximum seed stage companies are coming up? Are people relying more on external funding? Are they bootstrapping? What is the change that has really happened over the last 1 year?
Yeah, sure. So actually, if you look at in the last few years, and I had actually entered VC more than 10 years back. As starting with Sequoia, I used to attend Mumbai Angels events, which were pretty active way of sort of meeting the people in the network. So from there, like in the last 10 years, there has been probably multiple X increase in the activity that has happened, both in terms of the number of startups, the quality of startups, and the funding, right? Everything. So for instance, like 2010 and all, when Flipkart was raising the first round, VCs could actually take like 4-5 months to close a round. And right now it happens, in 2 days. Like you get a term sheet, and VCs are working over the weekend and responding to startups, because there is so much more competition in the whole investment ecosystem as well. So I think that whole activity has become much more multifold, much more mainstream. Like earlier, Flipkart used to be a product which only the people who want to order books would have, like 10 years back. And right now, even our parents know Swiggy, Zomato, they would have used it, so it has become much more mainstream. It has become much more larger as an industry. So I think that has completely changed, and that is why you see, so that's one thing. The second thing I feel what has happened in the last couple of years is that the quality of companies has become really good, because of, obviously the experience pool, you have, much more experience pool of PPs to hire from, and also you are able to also scale companies. So the whole quality of companies, that has become multiple X. And just coming to India, what has happened, as Ninad was also mentioning, for instance, that like 2020 had, in the whole year, about 12 companies that had become a unicorn. And right now, only in the first 4 months, there were 10 companies, and there are many more companies. So the third thing I would say is probably, the scale of the companies has become much more larger, right? And like 2021 is like the first year wherein you also see a lot more companies going IPO, like Zomato has filed for DRHP, there is Cartrade, there is Policy Bazaar, right? So this is the first time, companies have also scaled to a level that they're thinking about IPO, which is, of, I think Zomato's is probably more than $5 billion, right? So it has become like a very sizable, the companies become very sizable. So I think there's a whole, I think in the last decade, India has, right now, it's like the third largest geography in terms of the funding globally, in terms of also the number of sizable companies, unicorns globally, right? And only behind US and China, and ahead of a lot of the European countries, right? So I think there is a lot, it's at a very interesting juncture, and I'm actually, fairly personally excited about it. I feel that India will create many more companies going forward. And
just to interrupt, can you tell me, at the seed stage level, in the last 1 year, how many startups have you seen that are newly born? And out of that, how much is really, how many of them are really looking for outside funding, and how many have been bootstrapped? And is there any change if you look at historic data in terms of how this universe is shaping up?
Yeah. So I'll just talk about, for instance, the angel and the seed rounds. This is pre-Series A ones. So, for instance, there are more than I'll just pull out. I think there are more than 1,000 rounds across on an annualized basis across angels and seed that are happening, and that has obviously increased a lot. Right, the average ticket size of the companies, the seed rounds have increased over the time, because right now you have many more seed funds. There are funds which are participating in seed funds. There are larger funds which are also coming into this stage. So coming to the early stage as well, both the amount of activity as well as the round size have increased. If you look at in just the last 5 years.
Sure. Ninad, in your own experience, in the last 1 year, how has deal flow really changed? And is there a perceptible change in the quality of companies that you've seen coming up for funding in the last 1 year compared to the previous years?
So one of the trends we are seeing is that, more and more younger folks are sending us deals. Now we are getting third-year graduate students saying, no, we want to do it. So today we have a pitch day. We have a co-founder who's 18 years old, just turned 18. So that is moving really down the ladder. Earlier, it was more people who have probably been a graduate and then worked for a couple of years, got some domain expertise of e-commerce or something, then they have fintech, and then they think, okay, let's do a startup. These are fresh guys we are seeing. Suddenly, that's a big trend I'm seeing. Absolutely raw. They're willing to take the risk, come to us for mentorship. So that's a huge trend. Again, I had mentioned earlier, a lot of things are moving to tier 2, tier 3. Also, we are seeing a lot of women, either sole founders or co-founders coming. That's also a good trend. And I think, people are willing to take the leap on very new stuff, which they haven't even experienced. For example, agri-tech, most of the town city guys may or may not have experienced it, but they are willing to go down, stay in these smaller places, experience it, and have a startup solving problems. They are realizing that for every problem in India, there's a solution. So they are just looking out of the window.
Think about this. And if there are no problems, they'll create problems and solve them. So that's the beauty of the venture industry. But go on.
Yeah. So there is, for a problem with mull over the problem, these guys think of a problem and say there has to be a solution. Right. And they just look out of the window. They find so many problems. So that's the beauty of it. So broadly speaking, yes, the trend is irreversible, as Nandini mentioned, but more importantly, tier 2, tier 3 is coming up, new areas are coming up. Before the lockdown happened, I used to go to a lot of colleges. I was active in CII. And over the last 8 years, I've been to so many colleges across tier 2, tier 3. And my last experience is, 8 years back, if I had asked in a college, how many of you want to become startup founders, barely 20-30% is to resign. My last experience, 2019 late, when I gone to college in Kolhapur, 80% raised their hands, 80%, girls and boys. And balance 20%, I asked, what are you planning to do? They said, no, we will work in a large company and then join a startup. For a couple of years, you want to, just have some financial comfort. So we now have a generation, right or wrong, and I think it is right, where most kids have aspiration to join a startup. Now we have to create an ecosystem in our own way. Nandini and we are creating an ecosystem to fund them. This is irreversible, and that's why the deal flow is immense. There is no shortage of deal flow.
So let me ask you this question, Nandini. You started off with Bennett and Coleman, went to JP Morgan, and had a long career in the finance industry, investment banking, and then you went and did the startup. Are you already feeling like your last generation?
I think we all feel we are last generation to people who are even 5 years younger than me,
Okay, so that's not the question. That's just a fun thing. But does this worry you, this whole thing? And I asked this question with some healthy skepticism, because it's one thing to say, of course, you have a Oyo or a Ola person who's been a unicorn at such, under 30 and you're challenging Bajaj Auto or whatever. So it's huge, aspirational, and everybody wants to be the next big guy or the next richest guy or the next startup, etc. One noticeable trend over the last 1 year, and there is this. It's not a very. I don't know whether you'll appreciate this analogy. I read in one of the papers that the pet owners in the last 1 year have really leapfrogged. There's so many people who have bought dogs at home in the last 1 year because this is what the lockdown is doing to you. All the things that you ever wanted to do, you feel this is the time to do because one, there is no day discipline in terms of, whether it is school or college, of course, you always had more freedom. But even at work, when you're working from home, the kind of discipline that we are used to is no longer there when you do from home. There is a little bit of leniency out there. So that motivates you to do things beyond what your normal, what you would have thought about in your normal days. So is that creating some kind of unsustainable wish fulfillment kind of thing that is happening, which is likely to have its own unintended consequences?
Okay, so I think I'm going to answer this in two parts. The first one, so I'm a dog lover and I have a pet dog. I actually think that it's a worrying trend that, I think people don't understand what actually bringing, a pet home means. Because my answer is that, the pet doesn't adjust to you. You adjust to the pet,
Correct.
Sometimes. And anybody who's bringing a dog home thinking it's a toy and etc., they are up for a huge surprise and challenge. And I think it'll have a, tough consequences. If you just take that same thing into the startup, analogy, we are actually seeing at our end a shift in the amount of weightage we would put to younger founders, to the same point that you are making. And I, for one, am quite happy with the change that is happening. So what I mean by that is that, when I started out as an angel investor in 2010, if you just came and you said, I'm from IIT, I am below 30, cut, your valuation went 3 times. And people were actually standing in queues to cut a check for you. Like it was like a short pill for you to become a unicorn.
Okay.
I think in our own portfolio, we have seen that it doesn't pan out. Okay, so just to give a sense, we have 170 portfolio over the last 14 years. So we have enough data to see what works, what doesn't work. And what I can tell you is that a younger founder is not one of the key requirements for you to make it a successful thing. What is required is more and more we're actually seeing investors back people who are from the domain, who understand, what they are getting into. So if it's a simpler business, you might just say, okay, it's fine, let people hack and figure out stuff. The minute you're looking at more complex stuff, you need people who are either from the domain or who have seen what it takes to build a startup. So what I mean by that is that you see a very healthy trend of saying, Flipkart, the next level employees or the first team is now coming out and doing their own startup. So people want to back those guys. Or people, I also see a very nice trend of, say, second generation of a larger business. So they'll come out and say, listen, I don't want to do the main business, but I want to do a side of this business. Those businesses have a higher probability of actually making it through rather than, this trend of younger founders. So I, for one, I'm on the same page as you are. That see, the good thing is that there is now, like Ninad mentioned, there's this huge excitement around entrepreneurship, startups, etc. I think a healthier way to do this is for anybody who wants to get an exposure into it is join startups. Because I'm telling you the uncertainty, unstructured, like say, when we hire people, one of our key requirements is to say ability to operate in an unstructured, fast moving environment. You could be doing anything else, but if that doesn't tick for me, we are not going to get you on board. So if you want to become an entrepreneur, get inside, a startup, work for 2 years, 3 years, and then figure out, do I have it into me to do this?
That is the patience level that the new generation doesn't have.
Yeah.
So, Ninad, in the pitch days that I have attended, you've also, I saw that a lot of companies that pitched were also not just digital. So it's not like the IIT IIM who come and, say, I can write a code and I can solve this problem. But a lot more people who can, launch a desert. And I remember some of those companies into, financial advisory and stuff like that. So, what is the nature of non-digital startups, and what kind of founders are you finding there? Are they more credible, and in this environment, how are they faring?
Sure. So I think we get a lot of pitch decks, and some of them typically, as Nandini mentioned, are IIT tech guys, young guys. So it is neither an advantage nor a disadvantage. We take it. So we evaluate everything independent of the age and profile. All this helps, but the idea has to be something. In our mind, we fund startups which we think are potential moonshot ideas. I always tell people, we look at what can go right. We never think of what can go wrong. In an early stage business, if we keep up thinking of what can go wrong, we'll never fund anything at all. Can this go right? If it goes right, can that be a moonshot idea? That's the only thing we look at. And in this process, yes, if you have a little bit of experience, it does help because then you're part of the domain knowledge, and that can ensure that it makes it successful. But see, the digital SaaS businesses have taken off from India, and there are a lot of success stories. By its very nature, it can scale up rapidly, so all those can happen if you're on the right story. Non-digital also, there are a lot of possibilities. We have funded a company which makes Kerala banana chips, for example, chocolate stuff. So there is a massive consumer story which is there. Consumer behavior has changed. Consumption at home has increased. Consumption overall has increased, good or bad. And all this is something, there is a massive story going on there. And people and founders are realizing it. They are after it. We fund them. It's a longer story. It's, these SaaS companies get very high octane visibility because they, if they do well, they do well very fast. This is a longer journey, but it's a sustainable journey. It can become a unicorn if one sticks to it. So on the non-digital, I still think there's a massive opportunity there. And there are people willing to fund. We also fund. We are seeing people. I have mentioned agri-tech earlier, but again, young founders are willing to go down that track. And non-consumer, new products you're seeing. Absolutely something which you're not thought. Where did I think earlier that Kerala banana chip would come in a hygiene packet? But we funded it, and let's see how it does. We are excited about it. So yes, there is a massive story for non-digital, which does not get the same amount of probably high octane visibility because it takes time. It's a little bit of journey of perseverance, but the rewards are fantastic. On a long term, if you get a good market share of a very specialized product, probably not a large basket, it can be very rewarding. And there are people funding it. We fund it. After that, Nandini and team will also fund it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think this is very, very relevant. One insight from what you said, Ninad, for me, the greatest insight is when the difference between how you look at public markets and venture funding is that you only look at the positive aspects. What can this become is the primary driver as opposed to what is the downside. Because as a public market investor, that's exactly what you want to avoid. You say, what is my potential capital loss? And then you decide, no, this is a no-go. So you want to protect your capital, but here you have to be more optimistic and passionate about that. Nandini, so tell us, what do you look for when you, put out a research on a company or put out a company to solicit investments? Take us through that checklist, if I may call it so, in terms of what do you look for and how do you, in some sense, reduce the risk of investing in startups?
Good question, Maha. You want to know her secret? Get out all the secrets of a success. I was waiting for you to ask her that.
So, this question actually has a very long-winded answer, but I'll try and just, maybe synthesize it into what we have seen over the past. So, actually, I think for us to identify saying, is this a good company? So just to give you a sense of the kind of data that we look at about 800 to 1,000 startups a month. And from there, we actually get it down to about, say, 12 to 16 startups that we showcase to our investors. So that's the kind of funneling that you're doing. So 1 to 2% of what is going on. And if you actually ask me to put down a laundry list of the kind of parameters that I'm looking at, it would go easily above 100. Easily. It would actually go more than that, And what we have actually started now doing is trying to take away the human intervention to some part on it, because now we have enough data on not just some company that comes in and we say, oh, is this looking exciting? But we also have data of about 60 of our portfolios that have got exits and next round investments. So we are being able to combine these two and say, based on these two bits of analysis, what looks exciting versus what has worked. And then we try and say, okay, is this a company that we should put out into the member domain? Now, of course, there will be these usual suspects, and I'm sure you've been on so many on these questions and panels on stuff like saying, founder and the size of the opportunity. I'm not going to go through those which are very, very regular. I'm just going to maybe talk about a couple that might not have been that fully discussed.
So before that, can you tell me some criteria for elimination? Because the conviction level on elimination can be very, very high.
That's
so
correct.
You know what you have to avoid, and then the harder part is, of course, how do you pick the best ones? But
Absolutely.
The avoiding part is simpler, and it can be very concrete. So
absolutely, absolutely. I think number one for me is if the founder is not fully invested in building the company. It doesn't matter how good an idea is or what is happening. But if a founder comes to us and says, A, I run 5 other businesses and this is one of them, or B, I have, I'm working actually and this is something I'm doing on the side, or I have not yet fully decided to be full-time on it. Run away. This is because I think it is important for the founder to be fully invested in this before. So see, for the investor, I'm going to look at diversifying my portfolio, but I can't have the founder diversifying his or her risk. So that's number one that is there. The second one is actually something that we are seeing over and over again. It becomes a huge challenge, are litigation risks. So for example, if you have companies that are already, it's an early stage company, there are already fights happening, between the founder and the earlier investor, or there are some litigation, some legal suits, etc. We want to stay away from such companies. And I think those must be the similar, elimination criteria. That a similar thing or one needs to really look at is actually what is the cap table structure. So I want to spend like a 30-second on it. Is that, look, we hope that any company that we fund goes through several rounds of funding and it should become a unicorn. I'm not saying all will, I will not, but if nothing else, every company's valuation from where we fund and a good company, at least the valuation will go up at least 5 to 6 times minimum. The founder or the founding team has to have enough equity on the cap table for themselves that in subsequent rounds, they keep holding enough of the equity to be interested in the company. Otherwise, what that will do is that the company might do really well, but the founder has such low equity in it that after some time they say, listen, why should I work? So it's silly, right? So what is that kind of number that you're looking at? The sweet spot, so like say, I think at Ninad's level, it will be even more because they are coming in much, so if, but at our level, you will need to have the founding team anywhere above 50%.
Above 50%.
Above 50, even more than that. Because see, imagine if you don't do that and we come in, then after some time another layer happens, another layer. After 2 layers, assuming the founder's equity has gone down to 10%. What is their,
Skin in the game.
to actually to build it? Because see, who's the dreamer? The dreamer is the founder there. Who are you backing? So those are the couple of things that we will absolutely say. Then there are these other things that start coming on, saying, is it a large enough opportunity? Are there enough funded peers in the market? So what happens is that sometimes it might be a really large opportunity, but there are already so many guys there that, the fifth guy will only remain that much. So then the other big question that we always ask people, and we've seen that, is that, between the co-founders, so if there are say 2 people or 3 people, do they have complementary skills? And between them, are they being able to cover all bases?
Right.
So like one of the key things that we look at is to say, okay, if there are 2 people and it's actually a retail business, and we'll ask the question saying, Acha, who's responsible for sales? And it happens a lot more in tech companies where, founders are looking at each other. They're like, listen, I'm strategy. He's like, I'm development. We're like, okay, but who's going to go out there and sell the product? If the answer is not there, you actually start saying, okay, you take a step back saying, is this interesting enough? So at times we have actually walked in and we have said one of the key requirements for us to actually put the money in is that you get in a co-founder. So we actually walk in, we see that happen, and it happens a lot more in say consumer companies where there is a huge sales push. So couple of these, I think, apart from, the regular ones that you talk about, founding team, etc. And more so, we have started, looking at this as an algorithm-based approach for us, where we have started integrating our exit data to say, okay, what has worked? What has given thing? One more thing that I have seen has worked for our successful companies, okay, is the realization of the founder that when you are bringing an investor on board, that person has a voice on the table. So any investor, any founder who walks in and who says, oh, there is free money. So because, this is what I call the Shah Rukh Khan effect actually, and I think, these mainstream media actually just talks about these successes, so there are these of saying, oh, this company got funded by this much, this got funded by this much. What they don't realize is the responsibility that comes from taking money from an external investor. And one of the key things that is there is, do you know how to manage your investor? Do you understand the responsibility that you're taking of bringing somebody on board with, say, 30% equity? That person needs the answer. So you can't start saying, so, we have this situation where a lot of founders will say, oh, but this is so much of responsibility. Oh, but you are asking so many questions, or you are asking so much reporting. They're like, listen, you chose, right? You walked in to take the money. So that's a big one. We have seen that's the big difference we see between a successful company and not. Is, are you being able to manage your investor and maximize the kind of doors that they can open for you? It's a skill, It's a skill on which founder can, the same investor, 2 founders, one will get more doors open than the other one who will just keep saying, oh no, he's asking too many questions. I'm sure Ninad can add a lot more to it, but
I'm going to come to that just in order not to lose the thread. You made this point on capital structure, which I'm very keen to understand. You said the promoter should have more than 50%
at our stage,
in the company at least, so that they have adequate skin in the game, so the interests are aligned. Now, does this not lead you down a path, especially when, if the founder himself is not well funded, is unable to put in money? Does it not drive up valuation in order to ensure that your capital structure is maintained?
It's a tricky
investor. So how do you deal with it, especially if the underlying business is really promising? You don't want to lose out on the opportunity. At the same time, you have a constraint that the founder may have. And, it might just, if you just still want to go ahead, your valuation will get pushed up.
Yeah, so very good question. I think there are 2 ways to handle it. One is to keep asking the founder if they actually need so much money. So a lot of times what I see is, founders are coming up and they're asking for money which will maybe fund them for 5 years. And then, then say, Acha, now I need so much money, back calculation, mujhe 50% chahiye, so this is the valuation. The better way to do this is to say, okay, you are at the seed stage. How much money do you need over the next 18 months? And now you see, earlier it was still 18 to 24 months. Now I see even that runway compressing more, So you're saying, okay, how much money do you need to run for the next 9 months to a 12-month period? Now look at the valuation. So the minute the ask goes down, the valuation will be, it can come down and the cap structure still remains intact. So that's one of the best ways of doing it. The second way, of course.
So to clarify, the valuation is more driven by the need of the business at that point in time than the expectation of the founder, because that can be a very difficult conversation, because the business may need something, but the founder has his aspiration in terms of, what is the return he's making, isn't it?
No. So see, what I'm saying is that you basically divide your fundraising activity from, say, saying one inflow of money and I don't need money for the next 5 years. Okay. Versus saying, no, fundraising is an ongoing activity for me over 5 years. And I might take money in 5 rounds and from 5 different investors. So what that does is say, like, say, for example, if you will come and get funded, if you become an MA portfolio company, your valuation automatically doubles for the next guy. See, like for me, if Ninad has funded a company, I'm saying, listen, these guys have already looked at it. So I don't need to start from scratch. So in my view, if 2 companies come, same business, everything, but one comes from Ninad and one doesn't, the valuation of the one that's come from Ninad is much higher. Correct?
Right.
Same thing that happens with, say, something gets funded from, so just think about it. If there was a company looking for $2 million and it hadn't got funded before, and there is this company that needs $2 million and it has already got funded by Ninad and by NA. The valuation is much higher because 2 levels of investors have already shown interest. So you have to go, the valuation has to go step by step rather than a jump. Because I've seen that a lot of companies fail to raise money because the founder's expectation of the valuation is at such a huge contrast to what the investor is willing to pay. And the way to handle that is to get the ask down and the relative valuation down, and then look for money at every. So, like I was in fact saying that to somebody a couple of days back, you need to get onto the highway first. If you keep standing on the side and say, no, till I don't get this valuation, I'm not going to get onto the highway. You have to get onto the highway and then raise lesser amounts of money. You will get to that valuation without diluting your stake. I don't know if I answered the question.
Sure.
Yeah, and just to add, actually, across the stages, there are, there's a little bit of understanding. Like seed, you typically dilute 10 to 15%. Then you go for a Series A, you dilute, anywhere between 20 to maximum 30%. And then, lesser dilutions in the subsequent, like a Series B or a Series C. So that actually dilution percentages is sort of, fairly standard. What typically happens is that, if a founder does, for instance, 2 seed rounds or, a bridge round in between, then the dilution is a little bit more than what a typical, incoming investor would want to see in a cap table.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Neha, also, what is the trend in terms of bootstrapping and people, postponing external funding? So what's the trend in terms of bootstrapping you've seen, and in terms of sentiments of founders? What have you noticed in your data?
Right. So there are 2 ways, so bootstrapping, you typically see companies. So one thing is that if you raise a venture funding, then you have to give an exit to the venture, to your investors, say in the next 8 to 10 years. So there's a whole cycle which typically happens. So there's basically like a fork that founders have to choose, that do you need a venture funded life of a company, which is fast growth, which is there, but then it comes with some liabilities, or after a few years, you have to either do an M&A or an IPO or get them a secondary. So that is one path. The other path that some of the founders choose is that I want to keep growing my company and in a bootstrap manner. that the first thing is that you can do it only in a select set of industries. For instance, it's very difficult to do that in a consumer industry, where you have to put a lot of upfront cost in building the consumer, like, company like a Zomato or a Swiggy or even a Flipkart. They're very capital intensive businesses. So it is much lesser likely to do in a capital intensive business versus like a B2B business, slightly easier. Second is that, here you've seen actually very good bootstrap companies also come in, like, Zoho is an excellent example, Zerodha is an excellent example, Browser Stack, who are actually my seniors from IT, that's an excellent example. So actually they bootstrapped all the way, and then the first round that they had is a late stage sort of a round that came in. So the trend that we see is that there are some founders who would want to build company in a bootstrap manner. It depends a little bit on the sector that you can, because you'll have to finance, your business has to start generating cash upfront. And that's actually a very interesting also path to take. But more and more I see right now, because there are so many funding happening, and you can see such mega rounds happening. There's always this temptation to go towards the funded universe, because you can just accelerate a few years of development that happens. So I would say it's a very sort of a difficult to not be lured away with the funding landscape as a founder when you're starting a company.
So back to you, Ninad. What is your criteria? I mean, how do you weed companies out, and what is your selection criteria to back companies?
Sure. So thanks for asking, Nandini. You asked a question which I dare not ask her ever. So I got information indirectly. But yeah, she's covered a lot of ground. I won't talk about the normal stuff, which is market size, great big opportunity, all of that stuff, which is, of course, important. And founders also important. See, at our stage, there are very early revenues. There are sometimes pre-revenues, concept stage. So really speaking, the founder and his or her idea is the main thing, and how we think it can scale rapidly. That's the only thing that's the most critical thing. So how do we weed out? Weeding out. So we are all in the 1% business. 1% of the pitch decks we select to fund, and 1% of all we fund is going to become huge. So 1% business. My mother, she's no longer there, but when I explained to her, she said, "What are you doing in this 1% business? Why are you in this business?" But yes, we are in that 1% business. And not that the people we have said no to won't become big. They will. Some of them will. It's just that we haven't done. So to weed out, obviously there are some easy things like if you're not a full-time founder, we don't fund at all, zero. You have to put a total skin in the game. If your equity is diluted, we don't fund. At our stage, we require 100% equity by founder. It could be a little bit 4-5% here or there, but that is absolutely critical. If there's a solo founder and we feel that one founder cannot handle this diverse thing, we are careful. We have funded solo founders, not that we have not, but we are a little bit careful of solo founders, because it's not easy, because today you require from coding skills to marketing skills to finance. It's not easy for one person to handle it. And we also like companies which are momentum companies, because we are giving capital at a very early stage. Are these companies going to become momentum companies? Or will it become all, as in the industry we call it?
What do you mean by momentum companies? Momentum stocks, though I understand, but momentum companies?
So I will first explain living dead companies. Living dead companies are companies which are just about doing okay, 10% in year-on-year growth. They're neither raising funds, nor are they exiting. So, it's there, but it's living, but it's dead as far as VCs are concerned. These are no VC likes these companies. And if you think, our investment will eventually land up with this guy leading a living dead company, we do not invest in. Momentum companies are companies which, will keep scaling rapidly. The founder has the passion to scale. The business has the opportunity to scale. He or she will keep raising money. And eventually, after 7 years, we'll get an exit. See, eventually, if you don't think we'll get an exit, we do not invest. As simple as that. And Neha alluded earlier to the fact that Zomato and others are doing an IPO. It's a big, big landmark thing which is happening. That will show a real opportunity for a lot of people to exit. So will the exit happen? Will this guy give us an exit? If this person is not going to give us an exit, he's going to just be happy with a lifestyle business, living that business, we do not invest. So these are some of the factors we look at. The passion of the founder, will it scale, and eventually will we get an exit?
Sure. So Nandini, from an investor's perspective, you've been in investment banking and you've seen the public markets up close and personal, and now being on the venture side. For a public market investor to start thinking, or anybody who's experienced equity markets, never done venture before, but wants to look at this opportunity, what would you say is are the lessons that you need to unlearn? Like, one thing I have learned from Ninad is don't think about downside, think about upside only. So now tell me the lessons you have to unlearn when you want to say that I want to allocate 5-10% of my capital to this space.
Yeah, I think the first thing that you need to forget are Excel sheets. So, we are so geared towards looking at ratio and DCF and, peer comparison and what was funded, what was not funded. This doesn't work at this stage. So we actually see a lot of our investors, and I went through that same journey, because I was just so tuned to looking at Excel sheets and taking all my decisions over there, etc. So that's the first thing. So what we need to realize is that this asset class is about betting on a larger number of companies. Okay, so the key thing, so that's number one. That the second is that I don't subscribe to the view that you need to go out there and do unicorn hunting. So, like I mentioned in the beginning of this thing, I want to, look at a format of where you're actually looking at it as a portfolio and asset class. So what you do is you actually become very, very disciplined and start saying, I'm going to start investing in a certain number of companies every year. So just to go back a little bit, all of us have heard that calculation in startup investing, right? 10 companies, 3 will do really well, 3 will die, 3 will run, etc., etc. It works, but it doesn't work at 10. It starts showing signs of working at a 50 to 60 companies. Start showing signs of 50 to 60. So what does it mean? That even at an individual investor level, you will have to then basically start saying, how can I grow my portfolio to say about 100 companies in a 3 years period? And what you do is that you join, platforms and incubators and, asset allocators like say Ninad, who are at much earlier stage, or say networks like ours, and you start investing in as many companies as you can over a period of time. Because what happens is, like say today we have an active portfolio of about 100 companies. And at any given point of time, about 15 to 20% of those companies are in play. What I mean by play is that they are in conversation for next round of funding, exits, etc. So of 100, 20 are in play. Each investor also has to reach that same place. And that cannot see. So how do you do it? If you are a retail investor or somebody who has, say, a certain amount of money to put in, you can't do this on your own. You need to start becoming a part of a larger thing. Even if you are a family office. So assuming you are a family office that has, say, 1,000 crores to deploy. Okay. And you say that, okay, my allocation to startups should be about 50 crores, right? The same math that you're doing. If you want to deploy that 50 crores on your own, you need to have a team which is as large as what we have to be able to deploy that money properly. If not, you will have what is called selection bias. You will see 10 companies and you will say, array, 7 of them are looking very good. You don't need to see 10. You need to see 1,000 companies a month.
Right.
Because like we mentioned, both of us, it's a 1% to 2% selection. So it has to be looked at a step back from trying to look at the same criteria as a grown company. You can't. You can't even evaluate a company at our level with a Series A, because the growth changes. And second is, you will have to build a large enough portfolio. Both things need to be done.
Sure.
After that, you will get the understanding of how, then over a period, okay, there is a third part of to it. You need to, and that's an individual investor thing, and I keep talking about it to all our investors, is that, you need to double up on the companies that are doing well. What I mean by that is I'm just going to throw out, so what happens is that when you are invested in at our level and the next level happens, there is what is on the table called the pro rata right, which means that, say, assuming at our level, you own 1% of the company. When the next level happens, the founder of the company is bound by the agreement to allow you the opportunity to retain that 1%. But you'll have to put money, much more money to retain that, because the valuation and maybe say gone 5 times.
Right.
We keep telling all our investors that please double up and put that money there. Because that is when the returns will come, you will get the returns which are equal to, what your portfolio requires.
Sure.
Very, very critical thing. Yeah.
Sure. So if anybody thinks of getting into venture investing at all, what do you suggest should be the bare minimum corpus that you need to have? And secondly, what should be your expectation in terms of timeline? Like, what's the minimum period for which you need to, the minimum period you need to give an investment before you take a call?
Yeah. So see, what's happened is that SEBI mandated. So SEBI today, you have this whole angel fund structure. There, the mandate is of saying that you have to deploy 25 lakhs over 5 years period, minimum. So anybody who wants to be an angel investor in this country today has actually got to meet 2 criteria. This is a SEBI mandated. I don't agree with the second one so much, but that's what we are dealing with today. So see, one is 25 lakhs over 5 years, which means 5 lakhs every year. Okay. And the second one is a 2 crore net worth outside of your main residence. That I think is a little restrictive, because then, you could have 25 lakhs to invest, but you might not have 2 crores.
Right.
So that's the number that you have to look at. That's number 1.
That is the regulatory part. But what do you suggest is ideal? Because the regulator will always you set the floor in a sense. But do you think that's
see, is it enough? I'm not sure. Will it work if you have structures where people can, even diversify the 5 lakhs into more companies? It will work. So then what will happen is that if, say, assuming you are saying that, listen, build at least a 30 company portfolio over, say, a 3-year period, you're talking about, say, 10 done every year. So I think so 25 lakh is basic. I think you can start with that number. You have to have the patience of minimum 3 to 4 years, 4 years and above, before you will start seeing anything. Like, I've seen, and I have made the same mistake myself when I started out as an investor. I put money in 10, 6 of them tanked. And then I said, oh, this asset class doesn't work, etc., etc. If I had continued doing that, I would have been a much richer person, if I look back. So you have to have the patience, which is minimum 3 to 4 years. And you have to keep investing. Don't stop because the first year has not worked or your first 3 investments have gone down. No. And the other big one, and I keep saying this, is don't worry about the ones that are going bad. Don't spend, it's like those horror movies. Dekh liya, khatam karo. Don't spend time on saying, why has it? That's the nature of the asset class.
Right.
So I don't know if I answered that.
Sure, you did. So Ninad, from your perspective, what do you think should be the minimum corpus commitment and the time horizon that you need to look at?
So at our stage, we tell people to look at a minimum 5 to 7 years horizon, because of course we are coming a stage earlier than what Nandini mentioned. The second important thing is, yes, we do keep getting these comments, you're on a morning walk nicely at race course and, Arey Ninad, startup mein, I invested in one, I lost all my money.
Right.
I said, you will. He said, kya baat kar rahe? I said, no, so my benchmark is I tell people, you have to look at whatever corpus you have, look at 20 companies to invest minimum before, so that your capital is protected. You're not even starting to see returns. So if you do not have the energy or wherewithal to invest in 20 startups, don't do it, because this is a portfolio investment and you can invest. it's not, you can invest.
Just be prepared for the losses.
Yeah, so 20 companies, it's then an exciting, very exciting investment opportunity. And so I give 20 number as a benchmark number, saying that you will not lose money. Below that, see, you can hit on a great idea. You can invest in one startup and hit on a great idea. Although, if you're a strategic investor, so, if you are in some particular manufacturing domain, energy saving, for example, and if you like a startup, you can add value, then it's a different matter. But if you're looking at it as an investment, it has to be a portfolio investment. We recommend 20, whatever money you can put in 20, whether it's 2 lakhs, 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs, 50 lakhs, look at 20. That's the rough benchmark we give.
Sure. And the timeline is 5 to 7 years, you say?
Because ours is early stage, much earlier. We are in a very early, but
and you encourage the people, reserve capital for to put in the same company a second time and a third time. Is that how do you strategize that corpus?
So, Nandini said a right thing, you should double down, but we don't. We advise, if you're doing a portfolio investment, you invest in this, that's it. But yes, of course, I generally agree 99% with Nandini. This is one of the places which possibly you can have two views. Yes, if a startup is doing exceedingly well, you can double down at a higher valuation and take more risk. But if you're looking at, keeping on increasing your portfolio, you have to do that. So it depends on the investor. At 100x, we do not do that. With the first check, that's it. If the company does well, good. If it doesn't, do it. So we are first check writers. So it depends on your thought process. You want to just keep diversifying and have a large number, do that. If you think this horse is really going to do extremely well, double your bets.
Sure. Neha, tell me, you are investing in ventures as well. Tell us the unicorns that you have in your portfolio, potential ones.
So I think personally, I started investing since I'd left VC. And then we had a fund wherein we invested about 50 plus companies. So I think, unicorn probably, some of the larger ones that I'm excited about are companies like Rupeek, which is into gold lending, which is doing pretty well. There are a bunch of other companies in fintech as well, Indifi, which is into lending. But I would say that I would. I think anyone who's looking to get into, I think now is a good time to sort of start investing. I would, there are a lot more companies that I'm excited about, and I, keep doing that still. So, I think probably I've seen like the tip of the iceberg, and I'm hoping that, a lot more companies sort of, grow over time.
3 companies, Nandini, from your portfolio that look very promising from the last list that you put out.
I wouldn't want to give out names because I don't think that's fair, because we have about, like I said, 100 active and 170, but I can name some that have done really well over the last thing. So, and that gives a pointer to what can grow and what this thing. So one is Purple. You would think so. It's a Nykaa competitor, and when it came, and it has pivoted so well. When it came, it was. When we funded it, it had come saying, listen, we are going to connect home spa service providers to clients. So that's the place where, and then it pivoted, and today it's a Nykaa competitor and one of our fabulous. The other one that we have seen has done really well is Vadham Teas. So I'm talking of, and like we were mentioning earlier, not all of your good companies need to be tech. They can be completely consumer, and and if I look at one common thing that is there in say Vadham Teas and Purple, is the ability of the founder to keep raising money continuously, and understand that fundraising is a continuous activity, and B, keep the investors completely in the loop. So I think those two have really worked for both. So both Vadham and Purple are fabulous. Then one of our recent exits you might have heard is Exotel. That did really well, and Exotel is one of our first companies, and they raised just money from us, and they didn't raise any other round. I thought that was an amazing story. Imagine 2011, and they raised like I don't want to give out exact numbers, but in about 2011, no money raised, build the business out, and then you came out with an exit or a so fabulous. So that's the cusp thing. The other one that has done really well is Gigatime. So that is a company that is actually one of our recent investments and exit. So that is also, that's an electric vehicle. So I'm talking about something dramatically different, where there is this. So they build these batteries and things. So these 3-4 I think are fabulous. The one thing that we have seen actually, and we're very happy about it, is that our next level investor is not always the VC. So I keep saying this, that I don't think any ecosystem, not just India, any other ecosystem can just keep growing by the one financial investor growing it to a next level and giving to the next financial investor. Who's going to put in the strategic money into it?
Right.
We have actually seen a large part of our portfolio getting acquired or getting funded by strategic investors from that space. That I think is a fabulous way to look at. So if you actually didn't want to look at just the multiple, but saying, okay, how did some of the very good acquisitions or the same. So we have actually sold companies to Zomato, we've sold companies to Twitter, Reliance has bought, 2 of our companies, then, Dream11. So a lot of our companies have gone to the next level strategic investor. So,
Sure.
so those are the ones. So I don't want to talk about the ones that are in the pipeline, but like I mentioned, I think it's a strategy, or it's a play about having larger number of companies. Of course, when I say larger, it's still 1% of the pie, and then keep working with them to hope that 5% of them will become unicorns,
Sure.
and 30% of them will give you the composite return for the rest of the portfolio.
Sure. Ninad, which are the companies in your portfolio which are going to live up to your company's name?
This is always a tough question, and I'm glad you asked Nandini that first. So I was thinking in my mind, how do I respond to this? So we are now invested in 50 companies. 11 will announce today. Not easy. So I'll try and give, from different sectors. Not easy. Deep tech is one sector, but consumer space, Kerala Banana Chips we funded. They do hygienic, good banana chips from Kerala banana, Nendran banana. It's supposed to be very tasty. Once this panel discussion is done, open your Amazon Prime membership, order Kerala banana chips. Great guy, great founder. He wants to ensure that his packet of banana chips are everywhere next to the Lay's packet, and it's much more healthy. So I'm excited about it. It's a consumer business. Will take time, but very, very nice product. We funded a company which called Vitra, which worked in the AI ML space almost a couple of years, and they now have a product which works, and they're funded also, where a video can be translated. So this video we are speaking in English. They take the product and they can translate it in 51 languages within 5 minutes. So you don't need to go to a studio. You don't need to. So 51 languages they've mastered. They can do it. So this is on a little bit on deep tech. On edtech, Nourish we had funded in class 1. It's doing exceedingly well. It's a platform for trainers who can do the online courses easily. In class 1, we're also funded on the healthcare side. I'm trying to take different segments called the Renal Project. They are doing micro dialysis centers across Maharashtra first, and then so today dialysis is quite a painful thing. Unfortunately, if someone the person has to go to a hospital at 3-4 days a week, and if you're say far away from Bombay, you have to travel all the way here and do 4-5 hours. So they're setting up small centers, 2-3 dialysis. They've got around, I think, 25 or 30 already. So these are some of them. There is a company which are funded which does assessment. So you don't need teachers now to do assessment of papers. This is not just multiple choice. This is even textual assessment. So when you go to AI ML, there's so many things which can happen. So these are some of the interesting stuff which you've funded. But I can go on and on.
Thank you so much, Ninad, and the two wonderful ladies. Thank you so much for this discussion. I personally learned a lot of things from this, and I hope the viewers would have enjoyed this as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for
Thanks.
inviting us. We enjoyed being here. Thank you.